found that Mrs. Bingo had not been astray in her judgment of form. Arriving on the morrow, La Biles proved, as stated, to be an old dear. In the interval since they had last met, she had shrunk to about 4 feet 10. The steely glitter which he had always associated with her eyes had disappeared, and she had lost the rather unpleasant suggestion she had conveyed in his formative years of being on the point of enforcing discipline with a belaying pin. Her aspect was mild and her manner cooing, and when she flung her arms about him and kissed him and asked him how his stomach was, he flung his arms about her and kissed her, and said his stomach was fine. The scene was one of cordial goodwill. The new regime set in smoothly, conditions appearing to be hunky-dory. Mrs. Bingo and Nanny Biles hit it off together like a couple of members of a barbershop quartet. Bingo himself felt distantly benevolent towards the old dugout, and as Algernon Aubrey took to her and seemed at his ease in her society, it would not be too much to say that for a day or two everything in the home was gas and gaiters. For a day or two, I repeat. It was on the evening of the third day, as Bingo and Mrs. Bingo sat in the drawing-room after dinner, all happy and peaceful, Bingo reading a mystery thriller and Mrs. Bingo playing solitaire in the offing, that the former heard the latter emit a sudden giggle, and always being in the market for a good laugh, inquired the reason for her mirth. "I was only thinking," said Mrs. Bingo, now guffawing heartily, "of the story Nanny told me when we were bathing algae." "Of a nature you are able to repeat?" asked Bingo, for he knew that red-hot stuff is sometimes pulled when the girls get together. "It was about you pinning the gollywog to your Uncle Wilberforce's coat-tails when he was going to the reception at the French embassy." Bingo winced a little. He recalled the episode, and in particular its sequel, which had involved an association between himself, his uncle, and the flat side of a slipper. The old wound had ceased to trouble him physically, but there was still a certain mental pain, and he was of the opinion that it would have been in better taste for Nanny Biles to let the dead past bury its dead. "Ha ha!" he said, though dully. "Fancy her remembering that!" "Oh, her memory's wonderful," said Mrs. Bingo. Bingo returned to his mystery thriller, and Mrs. Bingo put the black 10 on the red jack, and that, you would have said, was that. But Bingo, as he rejoined Inspector Keene and resumed with him the search for the murderer of Sir Rollo Murgatroyd, who had been bumped off in his library with a blunt instrument, experienced a difficulty in concentrating on the clues. Until this moment, the signing on the dotted line of his former bottle-washer had occasioned in him, as we have seen, merely a concern for his wee tot. It had not occurred to him that he himself was in peril. But now he found himself filled with a growing uneasiness. He did not like the look of things. His had been a rather notably checkered childhood, full of incidents which had taken him years to live down, and he trusted that it was not Nanny Biles's intention to form an I-knew-him-when club and read occasional papers. He feared the worst, and next day he was given proof that his apprehensions had been well-founded. He was starting to help himself to a second go of jam omelette at the dinner table when his hand was stayed by a quick intake of the breath on the part of Mrs. Bingo. "Oh, Bingo, darling," said Mrs. Bingo. "Ought you?" "Eh?" said Bingo, groping for the gist. "Your weak stomach," explained Mrs. Bingo. Bingo was amazed. "How do you mean, weak stomach? My stomach's terrific. Ask anyone at the Drones. It's the talk of the place." "Well, you know what happened at that Christmas party at the Wilkinsons when you were 6? Nanny says she will never forget it." Bingo flushed darkly. "Has she been telling you about that?" "Yes. She says your stomach was always terribly weak, and you would overeat yourself at children's parties. She says you would stuff and stuff and stuff, and go out and be sick, and then come back and stuff and stuff and stuff again." Bingo drew himself up rather coldly. No man likes to be depicted as a sort of infant Vitellius, particularly in the presence of a parlour-maid with flapping ears, who is obviously drinking it all in with a view to going off and giving the cook something juicy to include in her memoirs. "No more jam omelette, thank you," he said reservedly. "Now, that's very sensible of you," said Mrs. Bingo, "and Nanny thinks it would be ever so much safer if you gave up cigarettes and cocktails." Bingo sat back in his chair, feeling as if he had been slapped in the eye with a wet sock. A couple of days later, things took a turn for the worse. Returning from the office and heading for the nursery for a crack